coming up on
we
today's
oftentimes,
episode?
as soon as we pull that old siding off, we've had houses that literally every piece of plywood on the entire exterior is completely rotten. So you would be surprised how often we get into situations like that where we actually pull the siding off and the entire exterior of the house is rotten. There were no exterior or interior signs that show that.
This is the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. Do you have questions about an upcoming exterior contracting project? We've got answers. Welcome to the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. Hey, welcome to the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. Your questions answered by the pros you trust. My name is Cole. I am part of the marketing team at Pro Exteriors, and joined as always today, I have with me owner and president of Pro Exteriors, Aaron Rogers. Aaron, how is your day going so far?
Wonderful. It's a little steamy outside, a little warm, but I think fall weather's on its way, and kind of excited for that.
All right, just wanted to break in here real quick. I'm sitting here editing this week's episode and realized that we had an audio issue when recording that we didn't catch until after the fact. So we've done our best to fix it, but every now and then you'll hear this seemingly random static that is not your device. It's not your speakers. It's on us. We try really hard to get things right, but we are not perfect. And we felt like the content in this episode, the information that Aaron shares, is totally worth just those few instances of static. So anyway, if you notice it, that's what it is. You're not going crazy. All right, let's get back to it. We got that preview of it last week, and I was really enjoying that. And now here in Kentucky, we have a heat advisory. It's going to be pushing 100 degrees before the end of the day, and yep. I'm not about it. I'm ready for fall.
Same here.
Well, audience, if you are tuning in, I'm not sure if that's how podcasts work, right? I don't think you really tune in. You had to find us, but if this is the first time you're watching or listening to an episode, each week we tackle a question that we have been asked by one of the homeowners that we work with, and maybe it's a question that we as consumers have asked ourselves, and then we try to find a pro, somebody with experience. More times than not, it's Aaron, but we try to bring on other team members from Pro Exteriors. We'll bring in other outside experts over time to have a really honest conversation in hopes that when we conclude, we all feel more confident with whatever endeavor we have with regards to our exterior remodeling.
Yeah.
With that said, Aaron, here is today's question.
Okay.
When is it time to replace my home's siding? Now, much like every week, that's a pretty loaded question. It's not a real simple answer. So I want to walk us through just some different topics that will help me as a homeowner figure out when it's actually time to replace the siding. So I was hoping we could start with, what are some of the signs that I need to be looking out for? Or maybe I have an exterior specialist come out and look for of deteriorating siding? Or how do we go about that? Like, what's the best way to figure that out?
Okay. So normally, like, the easiest signs you're going to see is obviously like your siding is cracking, or, it could be, if it's wood siding, your paint's chipping really badly. You can see huge gaps. Your siding is curling. Siding could be blowing off. Because there's such a wide variation, just like with roofing, in as regard to like the materials that we have in our territory. Every siding is going to kind of come with its own variable of like when it's ready. We have materials that are kind of shorter term materials, even though they're considered a lifetime material. They tend to have a kind of a lower lifespan than others. Some materials realistically with proper maintenance can last almost forever. It's not unrealistic to see a house that has, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old siding on it. Sometimes it's part of a multi-layer process there, but with proper maintenance, there are tons of materials out there that work great and have been maintained really well and can last forever. But normally we try to look at it kind of the same way as we do with roofing. When you have kind of some interior issues going on, normally that is coming from the exterior. So cracks in your siding, dents in your siding falling off, paint chipping really, really badly. Sometimes it could be animal infestation, kind of forces the next conversation. Or it's kind of a breakdown in your flashing, which is allow watering to kind of get past that exterior covering and into the inside of your house. So all of those things can kind of be the catalyst for the replacement. But sometimes we can repair, sometimes we can't. So.
And now a word from our sponsor. Oh, hey there. Sorry. I just got back from the pumpkin patch. I love this time of year. The cool, crisp air, the leaves changing colors, the very real pumpkins like the ones that I have here. At Pro Exteriors, we love this time of year too, which is why this autumn we are excited to announce to you Fall into Savings. Fall into Savings? What is that, you ask? Well, it's simple. With every new qualifying roof or siding purchase between September 1st and November 30th, you qualify for free gutter guards installed by us. Pretty awesome, huh? That's just one more reason to love this time of year. So this fall, leaf it to the pros. You can contact us today at 302-664-1700 or find us online at askproexteriors.com.
Promotion valid September 1st, 2024 through November 30th, 2024. Terms and conditions apply. Contact us for details. The guy in this ad is a goofball, and we realize that. There's not much we can do about it since he's the one who produces our videos.
Let's get back to the show. Are there any other, you mentioned water, like actual visible water getting into the home. Are there any other things that could happen under the surface that as a normal homeowner, I'm not walking around my house every day looking for things. Are there other hidden factors that sign that it needs to be, that is time?
So again, very dependent on what type of siding you have. Most plywood, the glue that's used to hold plywood together, when it gets wet and that moisture has to escape, it shows brown. So if you're on the exterior of your house and you see like some brown staining or anything on your siding, a lot of times it can be brown staining in your soffit. We deal with roof leaks all the time right at the end of the roof, that the actual leaks show up as brown stains in the soffit. And that's kind of the kickoff to make the original call. But yeah, so staining can kind of be a really big thing. We see it a lot at the beach with specifically like wood siding or hardy siding or any side of siding that kind of like sits flat against the house. If the improper house wrap was the original product was like an improper house wrap, we oftentimes, as soon as we pull that old siding off, we've had houses that literally every piece of plywood on the entire exterior is completely rotten. So you would be surprised how often we get into situations like that where we actually pull the siding off and the entire exterior of the house is rotten. There were no exterior or interior signs that show that. So you can hide a lot with siding. Sometimes you really don't have any signs. It's just a matter of like, it's older and, you're tired of having like your certain sidings painted every 3 to 5 years. So
you just mentioned that the fact that you have seen instances where there's been no external signs or suggestions that there's anything going on.
Yeah.
That leads me to another thing I wanted to talk about is just the sheer age of some of the material. So I'm assuming in those instances where you found issues where like the plywood underneath is bad, was that just the homeowner was ready for a change and you happened to find it? Or was it really like, hey, this has been on here for 20, 30 years. We want to go with a new look?
Yeah. I mean, some of it, a lot of times that's with like a wood siding where people they don't want the maintenance that comes with wood. Or it's you're kind of hitting that maintenance cycle where, you've had it painted a couple times over the last 3 years and, you're spending kind of like several $1,000s every time or up to $10,000, $15,000 every time you're trying to get the exterior of your house painted. And knowing that once you paint it once, the next time, your life is a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter. So the original siding could have been 10, 15-year-old before you had to paint it the first time. And then it's going to go to, every, say, 7 years and then every 5 years. And it just doesn't last every time you have to recoat it. The caulking and everything starts to fail and everything kind of starts to build up, which doesn't make it kind of last a little bit as long as it should. So in a lot of situations, yeah, it's just people that have had, wood siding or an older siding and, they want to spruce the house up. They want to make it look a little bit more modern, or they just don't want the maintenance that goes with some other sidings. So we've torn off the entire exterior and lo and behold, there's been issues for years that were uncovered. So
I imagine we probably run into people that have purchased a home from the original owner too, right? And they're just like, we don't want to deal with a natural material on this house. We want to do something new.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of materials are specifically designed to be less maintenance heavy, but ultimately still trying to mimic wood. Everybody originally had wood siding. Either it was a wood shake or a wood lap siding. So even like vinyl materials oftentimes are just trying to mimic the old wood siding. Like things like fiber cement siding, like James Hardy, same thing. That shake siding, that lap siding, that board and batten is all just trying to mimic the original wood siding that pretty much every house would have used. So, so people are just trying to kind of come up with a more modern thing and something that'll, hold up a little bit better to kind of our harsh environments here, and just require either no maintenance or less maintenance. No maintenance, I'm going to say in quotations, because there's no such thing as no maintenance on your house. But there are products obviously that take less maintenance. So,
all right. So could you tell me a little bit about the expected lifespan of some of the different siding materials? So let's start with wood.
Okay.
What are some of the expected life expectancy of wood siding?
Okay. So in our territory, realistically for siding, you're only going to have pretty much two options. You're going to have cedar, and then you can also get cypress. Cypress is going to be way more expensive, not common at all, but we do have homes here that have cypress siding on them. It is the expectation that you're going to get 25 years plus out of that. It is not uncommon to get 50 years out of a wood siding, but all of that comes with very, very stringent installation requirements as well as maintenance requirements.
Okay.
And then, you can go into the whole process of like homes, how we build them now. They're super tight. They create a lot more moisture than older homes did. They don't allow moisture to go in and escape like they used to. So all of that can kind of factor into it as well. But yeah.
What about some of the vinyl siding? What can you expect to get from that?
Vinyl siding realistically is sold as a lifetime product. Lifetime is a subjective term. What oftentimes ends up happening with vinyl is it just gets brittle. Like everything that you put outside, if you leave it in the sun, the UV rays eventually are just going to beat on it enough that it just becomes brittle. You get oxidization. So essentially you go up to the siding and you rub on it and kind of the color will come off.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you can paint vinyl siding, you can clean it really well and paint it. It'll last a very long time. It's very much like aluminum siding. I personally think aluminum siding was one of the best products ever invented. It had insulation on the backside of it. It could be painted over and over and over again. It doesn't rot like wood does. The only thing about it is it dents. So anything that bumps into it, it dents. And it is very unforgiving. It's not a siding that you can kind of patch in and patch out. So you can't like remove a piece like you can with vinyl or like you can with wood with aluminum siding without kind of creating some other potential issues. So, but yeah, so you can pretty much expect 25 years plus out of vinyl with ease.
I was not expecting you to say that about aluminum. It seemed like, as somebody who has not been in the industry for that long, it seemed like vinyl was one of the, or aluminum was one of those things that people look back on like, I can't believe we ever did that. Just because vinyl's become such a, maybe it's cheaper to to
Yeah.
produce. And
Yeah, vinyl is definitely cheaper to produce. It's easier to mass produce, and it's also easier to extrude vinyl in multiple applications with the color built into it. So with aluminum, everything's relying on paint. So it is a maintenance product, just like you would have with wood or like you have with Hardy. It is painted. But as far as the sustainability of aluminum siding, I still think aluminum siding is a phenomenal product. It's not widely used. It's not widely available. Many manufacturers just got out of it years ago. And it's aluminum is a volatile product. So, as the kind of the price of metal goes up and down, the price of that product varies wildly. We saw that with 4 years under the Trump administration. We definitely saw the price of metal go all over the place. Not necessarily it was his fault, but just simply saying that it's not uncommon to have metal of any kind just be extremely volatile. It can go all over the place. So it's hard to have a product that you want to mass produce and kind of keep consistently price wise. It's really hard to keep it consistent when the volatility of the market kind of has to dictate the overall price.
yeah, when you're dealing with a global economy where it could wildly
Correct.
swing, yeah, I could see that.
Yep.
What about some of the Hardy products? So talk to me about like the life expectancy of some of those.
Yeah. So I personally love James Hardy. I think fiber cement is a phenomenal product. The one issue we see more often than not is it's like anything, right? So anything that's installed properly to the manufacturing specs is gonna give you a full lifetime. We run into it a lot here because we do live in a coastal environment. Moisture and salt air and everything is a very big issue that we deal with here. We just see a bunch of people that just install things improperly, which makes things fail very prematurely. So a Hardy product realistically is a full lifetime siding. You can get 50 years out of it. It does require maintenance like everything does. You are going to have to paint it like a wood siding. But the painting process is much easier because you don't have, it's not an organic product. So it's not going to break down and deteriorate like a wood would. You don't have open grains. So you don't have to go through and like scrape off the old paint. If it's installed properly, 30 years should be easy. And in 30 years, you can probably get away with maybe 2 paint jobs in that 30-year span. The first paint job, it's going to fade no matter what. Everything fades. That first 10 years, you should see minimal fade. In the next, say, 5 years is probably when you're going to start forecasting for that first real good paint job. If you pay for a great paint job, you should easily be able to get 10 years out of that second paint job and then another one to kind of seal off your 30 years. But with proper maintenance, maintaining things like, your caulk joints and everything, because caulk does fail, maintaining all the little bit of maintenance things that come up when you see something obviously break or fall off, go ahead and get it taken care of. But yeah, 30 years easily.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are there any other materials like slate or any other of the, anything that I have not mentioned yet that we use?
So let's see. So we've talked about wood. We've talked about vinyl. We've talked about aluminum. We've talked about Hardy. There are composite materials. So when I say composite, there are other types of plastics that you can use. They now have some cladding systems, which can be PVC. It can be a composite, similar composite material, another kind of plastic. We have metal siding, which isn't quite as common in our area. Again, we live in a kind of a harsher salt coastal environment, but we do have a lot of metal products on the market right now. Full PVC products, great products in theory, could literally install them under the water in the ocean and they're never going to rot or have any issues there. But it is a PVC product, which does tend to expand rapidly in every direction. So a little bit more difficult of an installation process, but still a phenomenal product. And let's see, is there anything I missed? That's pretty much it. I mean, you have some there are some other products out there. There's some concrete tiles style products that aren't really common in our area. Midwest kind of sees a lot more of that stuff than we do, but they make roofing and siding products in like a concrete tile or ceramic tile. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, you can go to like things like stucco or drive it.
We haven't even talked brick or stucco.
Yeah, you can do brick and you can do stone. You can composite stone. You got stone that nails up in panels. You got stone that goes up. Literally, the individual stones can be installed with a stainless steel trim nail. You got lick and stick, which is essentially, you put a little mortar on the wall, squeeze it right in there. That's your lick and stick. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different products on the market now. It's almost too much. Like if you go on the internet, you can go out there and a homeowner could go buck wild and research, and you're going to come up with all these crazy ideas for all these products that you think are going to work really, really well together. But yeah, some of them last, some of them don't. Some of them just don't really work in our area because of the salt environment we live in. So
Yeah, and there's obviously a reason why there's things like wood, vinyl,
yeah,
fiber cement that have kind of risen to the top as the primary ones that we're discussing.
Yeah, vinyl is by far the industry. It's the market leader. It probably always will be, simply because of the price. You can't really find anything cheaper than a vinyl lap siding. Technically, it's a lifetime product. You can get 25 plus years out of it with proper maintenance. It's not going to be the same color in 25 years. By far, it's not going to be anywhere near the same color. But yeah, we have multi-million-dollar homes here that have vinyl siding on them. I don't agree with that. I think if your home is above maybe 750,000, I don't see any reason why your home should have vinyl on it. But I didn't build it, so I can't say anything.
All right. So far, we've talked some of the signs of deteriorating siding. We've talked about considering the age and the material that was used. I want to talk a little bit about energy efficiency and curb appeal, because if you visually inspect your siding, you're like, no, we're good. And you think about the age of it, and it's like, there's no real reason why I need to replace it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that technology has changed some. So even vinyl siding that was made 20 years ago, I'm assuming there's options today that are even insulated that
Yep.
might be different today.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of those things, regarding energy efficiency and even the increasing the value of your home if you're thinking you're going to be selling it in the next year or two? Or
Yeah. So we'll talk curb appeal first. Obviously, curb appeal is kind of a buzzword, because what you think looks good on your house, not the next person might not think it looks good. The next person comes to the door, thinks it looks just fine. Some people put a lot of effort behind that. Some people don't. Curb appeal is not just the exterior of the house. It's, kind of the entire exterior. It's the driveway, the landscaping, the flowers, the this, the that, the railings. So the last, say, 20 years have been kind of really big for houses having what we call kind of a layered texture for the front of the house. Everybody puts all this effort into the front of their house because that's the part that people see the most. But, it's not uncommon to have, 3 or 4 styles of siding. Like, we can have a lap over here and a board and batten over here and a shake siding over here. And then maybe we'll do some stone accents, and, we'll have 3 or 4, sometimes 5 colors. You'll add some shutters. You can add some window boxes, a trellis over here, a wood garage door. I mean, you can have as much curb appeal as you possibly want. And, you're never going to please everybody. Somebody's still going to walk up and be like, wasn't for me.
sure.
So curb appeal can be kind of, it's in the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. It looks good to you. Yeah. If you're looking to sell your house, we see a lot of people that really just kind of need to update the front side of their house. You have a house that's probably 30, 40 years old. Front side of your house probably all looks one shade. The old classic brick rancher with white aluminum siding. It's pretty classic in this area. So like those houses, we usually try to throw like some shake or some board and batten in the gables, and, we'll add some color over here, white here, other colors here. Paint the front door, kind of add another little pop of color, different color shutter. Just trying to layer it out, have a bunch of different accents. And so, yeah.
Do you recommend, I mean, I've seen homes that you can tell the person has a very particular style and taste. If they're looking to sell their home, do you typically recommend to people that they go simpler to have a broader appeal? As opposed to like doing higher end finishes, just go kind of more bland? Or
I wouldn't necessarily say bland. I would say that if you're looking to redo the exterior of your house and the goal is to have the kind of mass appeal, then I would be just wise as far as like what colors you go for.
Hmm.
They're not quite as popular now, but there was mid 2000s to early 2010s. A lot of the siding manufacturers had like Bermuda colors. It wasn't uncommon to do like a pink siding, like a Bermuda pink, Bermuda blue, Bermuda green, Bermuda yellow. If you're the odd duck out in your neighborhood as far as like kind of what your house looks like in comparison to the average other home, then yeah, maybe don't go for such kind of a stark contrast if you're trying to sell your home within a relatively short period of time. Um, Try not to go super super crazy. Try to figure out. Honestly, the easiest thing to do is just ask your contractor what's popular right now. Like, what do you see as far as like color variants? Like, what are you seeing the most of? We install it every single day. I can tell you that blues and grays are the two most popular colors in the last handful of years, outside of white. Anybody who has two pairs of eyes, I mean, can essentially look out and you see that everybody wants that white siding with the black roof and the black this and the black shutters and the black gutters and the black door. Everybody went over the last 4 years. Everybody wants that farmhouse black and white look. It's very nice if done properly. But if it's 4 brand new construction custom homes side by side by side, and every one of them does white with black accents, it's a little muddled. How do you stand out in a world where everybody wants the same exact thing? So yeah, best thing you can do, ask your contractor. He'll shoot you in the right direction. He'll tell you what's popular. He'll give you a couple of different options. We use a rendering system where we can take pictures of the exterior of your home and we can create a complete 3D rendering for you. We can change almost anything on the outside of your house to kind of give you a better idea. But don't go rocking the boat. Don't go crazy. Don't hyper personalize the exterior of your home, and then in 2 years can't believe somebody doesn't like the same thing that you like. So
Yeah, you will inevitably sell your home, drive back through the neighborhood 6 months later, and be like, I can't believe they changed it all.
why would they ever do that? Yep.
All right. We have not yet turned to deciding, okay, yeah, it's time for me to replace my siding. Could you talk to me a little bit about the cost benefit to replacing versus repairing?
Sure. So when it comes to your maintenance cycle, that's usually when we tell people like it's time to replace or at least seriously consider replacing versus repairing. There are times where repairing isn't recommended because there's no way to warrant the repair. Uh, Older vinyl that's 25, 30 years old, that stuff typically is so brittle that you can barely touch it without it cracking. None of that stuff is available. All the technology, as far as the pigments they use, the thickness, the extrusion process, the way they put the color into everything, all of that stuff is upgraded. So it's almost impossible to tie into the older stuff without causing some sort of repair issue or maintenance issue.
And like you said, the color is going to fade unless it's been painted. There's no way you're going to match that color exactly.
Yeah, 100%. And then, honestly, vinyl's not really meant to be painted. You can paint vinyl. I've seen it done successfully. But vinyl was never meant to be painted. So when you paint over vinyl, it does make the actual base, the subproduct, the actual vinyl product act differently. Vinyl expands and contracts rapidly. If you paint it, it now acts differently because it's now got this substance on the exterior that it has to contend with. So it may hold heat, it may expand and contract even worse. You may have issues with it actually breaking down the product even further. So yeah, I don't recommend painting vinyl, but it is done. It is an option. But again, all of that money is, you might as well throw it in the air and watch the wind blow it away, because in a few years you're going to have to replace it anyway. So I usually always look at it from the standpoint of like, how much maintenance is it going to take over the next, say, 5 to 10 years? And in that same time period, if let's say that your current project is a $20,000 replacement project. In 10 years, that could be a $40,000 replacement project. So how much money are you going to spend over that next 10-year time frame? And how much of that money is just wasted? There are times where financially people they can't swing it. I get it. We don't hold that against you, but we always try to weigh it against, like, ultimately, what are you going to spend in maintenance over X amount of years before you have no choice but to replace. So we always try to kind of base everything that way.
Gotcha.
And then, every once in a while, we do run across asbestos tile quite often in this area. Asbestos tile, it can kind of be patched in, but typically when somebody has asbestos tile in their house, we pretty much always recommend replacement because we don't know what's underneath of that. It's usually layers and layers of siding. Anytime you're going to have multiple layers on a house and you want to replace it, we're going to rip everything down to the substrate. No different than if we were doing a roof. If you go in there and you've got 2 layers on your roof, you got 3 layers on your roof, 4 layers. I've seen up to 6 layers. We're going to rip every bit of that off and get down to the original substrate so that we can protect the house from the original substrate and then build out from there. So yeah. So again, it all comes down to, like, what's the maintenance cost? What's the longevity of that product? If it's a 30-year product and you're 25 and you've got to spend, let's say, 25% of what the replacement cost is to fix it, I mean, I personally don't see the value in that, because whatever you save now is just going to get tacked on to the price at the end of that 5-year term. In 5 years, you're going to have to replace it. You're not going to have a choice. And at which time, the price has just gone up. So we've seen crazy price increasing over the last 5 years. Anybody who sat through COVID obviously knows that nothing is as cheap as it was, pre-COVID. But that's only going to continue to get worse. So
before we move on, I'm about ready to make the decision as the de facto homeowner that yes, it is time to replace it. So I want to hear a little bit about what my options are.
Okay.
We talked a lot about in the roofing episode about how insurance companies at times, like, we can get insurance companies to replace roofs for homeowners. Mm-hmm. Does that also work for siding?
It does on occasion. It is a little bit more rare for siding because we don't have the same codes for siding. Surprisingly enough, there is no code that says how many layers of siding you can have. So I've worked on some, we'll call them tenant houses, where essentially they've been, they may be in kind of a lower income or kind of a lower blue class area where that house has been kind of a rental house for the last 50, 60 years. I worked on one specifically, I can remember it in downtown Laurel. That had been a rental property for the last 50 years plus. There was 4 layers of siding on that. And when we got there, we had kind of a little cyclone come through there, and it ripped off almost 60% of one whole side of the house, and then kind of created some issues on the rest of the house. So, the big red insurance carrier at the time was the carrier, and they came in and they gave us a bunch of repair. They gave us repair money for the whole thing, and it was a struggle to kind of go back, and we ended up having to utilize like the manufacturer's installation products or specifications to say, like, we can't install this siding because we don't have a proper substrate. So sometimes you have to go to the manufacturer versus the code. It is possible. It's just a lot harder because the codes aren't as stringent with siding as they are with roofing.
Okay. So it's not going to be as...
It's not as cut and dry. If you see somebody that has a whole bunch of siding off, it's not like, oh, they could file a claim. It's not quite as simple. Delaware is a non-matching state. So, like, you could have the entire front of your house get replaced through insurance. It could kind of match. It's never going to match 100%. It could kind of match the siding on the rest of your house, but the law basically says that they don't owe to match the siding on the rest of your house. So, yeah, it's different.
All right. Well, so you have convinced me it's time to replace the siding on my house.
Yep.
What are some of the factors that I need to be considering as far as the materials, durability, the look, the cost?
Mm-hmm.
You've shared a little bit about that when we were talking about considering the age of the existing siding.
Yep.
But do you want to walk back through just some of the pros and cons?
Yeah. So, like I said before, like we're always going to try and go back to the original substrate of the house. So, depending on the age, hopefully it's plywood on there. We're going to want to get back to the original siding or the original sheathing on the property. We're going to want to inspect around all the windows and doors, which are, the areas that are more than likely the areas that water is going to get in. So we're going to pull off the old house wrap. We're going to inspect everything that way. So we always go into it knowing that we're probably going to have at least a few pieces of plywood that have to get replaced. It's pretty common. But then, we're going to go back in and we're going to look at, how old is your house? Is it older than, say, if it's older than like kind of early 2000s, the inside of your house was built much differently then than it was after the early 2000s, simply because the codes changed. When we upgrade the building code, houses are built differently. So it lets me know that your house is going to leak air a little bit differently. So we may look at using a different style house wrap in a situation like that. We may talk about adding some exterior insulation if your house is, 50, 60 years old. So there's a whole bunch of variables that kind of go into that. If you have somebody that comes in and literally just says, like, we're going to tear off the old siding, we're just going to put new siding right over what's there, you're leaving yourself with a lot of liability. You don't really know if the new siding and the old house wrap are compatible. Not taking the old house wrap off, you don't know what's underneath of it. The same way as if you didn't take the underlayment off of the roof, you don't know if there's plywood issues. You don't know, kind of what you're covering up by putting this new product over the old stuff. We run into it a lot of times we have rot, or at least a little bit of rot at the corner of every single window or the bottom of every single door. Around all of your dryer vents, your range hood vents, your exterior outlets. We have a little bit of surface stuff there. It doesn't necessarily mean the plywood has to be replaced, but it's definitely something we want to look at. We run into a lot of houses that were built in like the late 70s, early 80s, early 90s, where the exterior of their house is actually like foam board. There is no sheathing on there. In most of those situations, we want to tear that foam board off and we want to go back with real plywood. Couple of different factors, obviously, but at the end of the day, plywood is the best substrate for our current siding products. We want like a nice rigid backed surface to kind of mount our new siding. All siding should be nailed into the studs. I know that's not super common knowledge, but every product requires you to nail the siding into the actual stud. So if you see some guy just going willy-nilly nailing wherever he is and he's not hitting the studs, your siding's going to fail prematurely. So like all those little things kind of add up. You can do a really, really quick down and dirty siding replacement. You leave the soffit, you leave the fascia, you reuse the gutters, you leave the old house wrap in place, you leave everything on the exterior of the house except for the actual vinyl siding and the associated trims with it. You can get really, really cheap with that replacement. But like when we come in, we're tearing everything off. We're doing it just like we do a roof. Gutters come off, soffit comes off, fascia comes off, underlayment comes off. Everything on the exterior is going to be brand new. All the lights, the dryer vents, everything comes off. We typically, on almost every single siding project that we do, we actually have the electrician or the power company come in and we pull the outside meter panel so that we can get behind it. Some guys will just literally cut the siding around it, and then they just J-channel around those boxes. Most of those things are installed over the original siding. So why are we going to go through this entire expense and we're just going to butt the siding up to it? It wasn't how the original installation was done, and I don't think we should be doing it that way either. So like, we want everything to be brand new. We want it like this house was just built, and when we leave, everything was brand new. So
you talked about, you mentioned that it would be silly, or at least in your opinion, if you had a $1 million home having vinyl as the material. Is there any such thing as like overdoing it on your house if you are putting in more of a standard foam?
Yeah, I mean, again, you can overdo it on everything. This a lot of times comes back to like the people that they try to personalize what they want on the property, and it doesn't always necessarily kind of make either financial sense or like your intended purpose of the property. So that's why, like when people flip houses, they kind of go with extremely neutral colors. They're not going to go overboard. You can go overboard on your home. If you live in a $300,000 house, I don't think you should be putting $150,000 into an exterior remodel. If you live in a $300,000 house, I don't think you should spend $50,000 on a bathroom remodel, or $50,000 on your kitchen remodel. I don't think you should putting travertine floors into the inside of your $300,000 house. So you could do the same thing with the exterior of your home. If you live in a $300,000 to $400,000 house, hardy plank siding or fiber cement siding, cedar siding is probably not the most realistic choice. Vinyl is probably going to be more in line with the exterior of your home. In my personal opinion, if you live in a house, I know that previously I'd said 750,000. I'm trying to be realistic here. Anything above $600,000 realistically should have some sort of a premium siding on there. You can get kind of a more premium vinyl. You can get like we install a CertainTeed siding. CertainTeed has like the Main Street, which is like your kind of your larger, your more popular siding. That's an 042 as far as the thickness of the vinyl. And then you can also go with like the Monogram, which is an 046. So having that extra little thickness, it does kind of make the siding last a little bit longer. It is a more premium siding overall. It does have a higher wind rating than the Main Street product will. So you can consider kind of upgrading from that point. But, vinyl and hardy are not the same product. Vinyl and cedar are not the same product. Using some of these composite or PVC products aren't the same as using like a fiber cement. There's a lot of factors that go into it. I personally, kind of in the back of my mind, I usually have a price point at which I think everybody should consider kind of an upgraded siding, or at least considering upgrading some areas to kind of give a little bit more curb appeal and kind of make it look a little nicer. But yeah, to each their own. Like I said, we have multi-million-dollar beach houses that get built daily here in our area that have vinyl siding on it. I very much disagree with that, but I didn't build the house. So
yeah. So you're saying maybe if you have a $400,000 house, maybe do a couple of the dormers with a higher end, or like a gable section, like an accent piece with the higher end material.
Yeah, you can use the higher end materials, or the difference between a vinyl lap and a vinyl shake. I mean, there's a pretty good delta between the two cost wise. So you could do the gables in a vinyl shake or a vinyl board and batten, at least to give it some curb appeal and at least upgrade some of those smaller areas where it doesn't kill your budget ultimately. But yeah,
we're kind of talking specifically about the materials and the things to consider. Are all contractors that do siding projects, I know they're not all created equal, but are they all capable of installing all the different materials? What are some of the things that I ought to be looking out for when it comes to that? If I spend all this money on James Hardy material, that in itself is going to be a certain expense, but then the installation, I don't want to waste all that money by having it installed poorly.
Agreed. So you don't, you have manufacturer certifications when it comes to some of the siding projects or siding products, but not quite as consistently as you do with roofing.
Okay.
Siding has, in my personal opinion, has a much larger degree of error than roofing does. Roofing is not rocket science. Siding, in my personal opinion, has a lot more science behind the installation. A lot of factors go into the underlayment, the house wrap. We talk a lot about surfactants and surfactant resistant house wraps in comparison to the product. So like the two largest house wraps that you can use are Tyvek and Typar. If you use the regular version of Typar or the regular version of Tyvek, it is not meant to go behind things like fiber cement or cedar. the surfactants that are in both of those products will break down that house wrap long term. And the times where I talk about houses being completely rotten, a lot of those are 100% the fault of the house wrap being used. Sometimes you have to have, the way we build houses these days, you have to have an air gap or a drainage gap behind your siding, or you have to use a siding that is meant to, have certain types of siding installed over it. We see a lot of builders in this area will install fiber cement siding over plain Jane Tyvek. It requires a certain perm rating, and Tyvek does not have that perm rating. So there's nothing we can really do because there's no code that states that. But if you talk to a professional siding installer, professional roofing installer, all these little details are things that they can provide for you that somebody that just kind of does siding on the side or on occasion, they may not have that information. You do have some things like the VSI, which is the Vinyl Siding Institute. They do have a certification that you can check into. CertainTeed has a master installer program that you can look at. I think it's called Master Craftsman. Wolf has a Wolf Pro certification that you can provide. James Hardie has their Elite Preferred program for contractors. So there are some things out there that you can look for or ask for specifically, like, hey, we're looking to get, James Hardie. Are you certified with James Hardie? Here in our area, there's only 2 of us that have that certification. For the Wolf Pro, there's probably maybe a dozen to 15, kind of in the whole Delmarva Peninsula. CertainTeed, there's probably same thing, maybe 15 or so in the Delmarva Peninsula area. But yeah, so you can ask for that stuff. Some of it makes a difference. There's plenty of companies out there that have all those certifications and still use the cheapest labor they can get a hold of. But at the end of the day, the burden oftentimes is always going to fall on you as the consumer. If you're having a name brand product installed, again, from a previous episode, it should be 100% spelled out in the contract, what house wrap they're using, what products they're using, how they're fastening it, what type of fasteners. All that stuff should be laid out. So the burden ultimately is going to fall on the consumer to do their homework. If we're installing a James Hardie lap, if you go into Google and you type in James Hardie siding installation instructions, you're going to come up with a PDF manual. You're going to come up with 2 versions. You're going to come up with like the super in-depth, like 40-page version, which is going to give you every possible detail, every spec that you'll never need to know. And it might come up in like 3 different languages. Or the other one is the James Hardie Best Practices Installation Manual, which is only 3 pages. That one's going to give you the easiest way to use the consumer to kind of look at it and go, is that detailed right? Yep, looks good. That detailed right? Look, looks good. Unfortunately, we can't really count on the local code enforcement for some of this stuff because we routinely see jobs that, have stuff installed wrong and code enforcement comes around and it still gets passed. It still passes inspection. Some stuff they just can't see once the siding's up. It is what it is. And then other stuff is like super, super obscure codes that just don't get enforced. So yeah. So you can always find a guy that can do it super cheap and super quick. You can always find a guy that can charge you a whole bunch and he may still do it super quick and just use super cheap labor. But ultimately, the best thing I can tell any homeowner is do your homework, research the products and their installation, and be there when the siding is actually being installed. I get that not everybody can be, but if you come there at the end of the day, your siding project is not going to take 1 day. It's not like a roof. It's normal for a siding project to take 1 week, 2 weeks. You're going to come home every day from work or be there out there in the morning before you go to work. Look at the installation while it's happening. Are they nailing into the studs? Does the flashing match the installation instructions for that product? Excuse me. Are the overlaps right? Are they using the appropriate trims in this area and this area? All those little details. If you see one little issue, it's probably not a concern. If you see 2 issues, depending on what the issues are, it still may not be a super big concern. But if you notice that almost every single installation issue is incorrect, then there's a huge red flag, and I would probably stop the project, meet the actual contractor on site, and just show him like, hey, I have the same information you were supposed to have. I'm looking at it knowing that this is wrong. It doesn't look like you guys really are taking the time or have the courtesy to install this properly. So we need to fix this before you get the job finished. But yeah, so.
Aaron, I want to talk directly to the audience just for a second.
Okay.
Episodes 5 and 2, we talked at length about how to find a reliable contractor. And Aaron has driven home the point a couple times of just how easy it is to become a business in the state of Delaware. So do not make the assumption that just because you hired a company to come out and do the project, that they are doing it the way that it's meant to be done. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody's shady and not doing things the way that should be done. Some of them might not know what they don't know, and that's not good either, because that's going on your house. So like Aaron's saying, ask the questions. It's your home. Don't feel bad going out and looking at the stuff that's being done to your home, because you're the one that has to live with it.
Yep.
For the long run. To kind of bring this conversation home, I just like every topic we discuss, I realize it's hard to give a succinct answer, but as best as you can. I live in a pretty standard, it's 4-bedroom home, but let's say a 3-4 bedroom home. I decide I'm going to go with vinyl siding. I want to replace it. You've already established that at Pro Exteriors, we're not going to just replace the siding. We want to go down to the bare substrate. If I'm looking at replacing the siding on my very average home, what is the ballpark figure that I need to be budgeting for, understanding that there's a million variables? Am I looking at $5,000? Am I looking at 30 grand?
If you're looking at like kind of your average house, I would say an average house of, 1 story, 2 story, not crazy cut up. If you're going to go back and you're just going to do kind of the plain Jane, we're going to do a little bit of vinyl. You might have 1 or 2 gables that have some accents. We're going to reuse the gutters if they're in good condition. I would say budget at a minimum around 15,000. I would start at 15. And for that same exact house, if you want to upgrade, a few little pieces here and there, you might want to redo the gutters or add gutter and guards. You might want to upgrade the actual siding. You want to add a little bit more curb appeal. One of the things that we do a lot of is we add like kind of a larger trim around all the windows and doors. So that same $15,000 job can jump to $25,000 quickly. But at the end of the day, like $25,000 on an exterior, like completely redoing your siding, it's one of those projects that typically pays off long term, especially if you look at kind of the lifespan you're expecting out of that project. $25,000 over 25 years is nothing. That same house in 25 years, if it's $400,000 now, it's probably going to be worth $700,000 in 25 years. I mean, who knows, right? But yeah, so I'd say 15 on the lowest end, 25 on the highest end. Again, you can always find people to do it cheaper. You can always find people to do it more expensive. But that's kind of like the best way to go about it. Kind of have a really general idea. $15,000 if I just want to get down and dirty and just replace it as is. $25,000 will get you some upgrades and some little niceties that should pay off.
What that tells me is if I get a quote back that's significantly less than the 15,000,
yep,
I need to be asking, what does that include? Because
more
than likely it's, well, they're just going to pull the old siding off and put new siding up, and
correct,
might not ever uncover some of the bigger issues. And I also, kitchens and bathrooms are one of the things that people, like you said, spend a ton of money on, because it's fashionable to have like a nice new kitchen and that kind of stuff. People drop 50, 60 grand on a kitchen, and a lot of it is just aesthetics. We're talking about essentially the blanket to your house, the thing that's going to be the first line of defense, when it comes to bad weather. And so that seems pretty reasonable. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's
I mean, it's the the exterior of your home is the thing that everyone else sees way more than they're ever going to see the inside of your house. So not only is it important as far as like, the overall aesthetics of your property, but also like the roof and the siding is what keeps the moisture out. It's what keeps the living portion of your home dry. So it is a crucial piece. I think that more often than not, people underestimate the technology that goes into exteriors nowadays. Uh, Roofers don't really get a lot of respect, and you can always find a guy that's going to do it way, way cheaper. It may be, a guy and his friend that do it kind of part time on the side. There's a couple of guys that we don't make fun of them, but we often joke that if they can do one job a week, it pays for their car payment, their mortgage, and a case of beer. There's a lot of those guys out there that they're perfectly okay with running a business. They're not worried about next year or the year after. They're just worried about this week.
Yep.
And their price oftentimes reflects that. But with that being said, you should always choose a contractor that will be here this year, next year, 5 years, 10 years from now. In the event that something actually goes wrong, having a contractor that is still in business and that will actually come back and fix the issues at no cost.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to put a price tag on that. So yeah. So doing your homework, we talked before, checking license, get a copy of their business license, get a copy of their contractor registration for the state of Delaware, get a copy of their insurance policy, which should include their general liability, their auto liability, because, if their vehicle isn't registered in their business name, if their vehicle goes through your garage door when they pull in the driveway, you can't go after their business for that. It should also include workman's comp. I won't go as far as to say like it should include like an umbrella policy, but definitely those things should be very easily for a proper business person to provide, like that. Most of us that have been doing this a long time, like that information is on our phones. We go into Google Drive. I can send you 5 documents right here while we're standing here. And then you could always go to the fact of like checking with the suppliers, call the manufacturers. Most of the manufacturers that we work with and a lot of our competitors, those big brand names are going to know those people. They recognize who the bigger players are in the area, and they meet with us. They want to give us, additional training, or they come into the showroom and they give us brochures and whatnot. So we have relationships with all those guys, and any contractor who does it for a living, who does it professionally and wants to be taken seriously, those manufacturers and suppliers are going to know who that person is. And I think that's an important piece of this whole thing.
Yeah, more so, and I can attest to it. More than just having a surface level relationship, those guys are coming in and doing trainings for our crews, and that's worth its weight in gold to know
Agreed.
how to install it, like you talked about.
Yep.
Well, I just want to recap kind of what we talked about and make sure that I didn't miss anything. So my wife and I are on the fence about whether or not it's time to replace our siding. We want to be looking for signs that the product has deteriorated, maybe looking around the inside of the house as well, just to see if there's some stuff that doesn't look the way that it should.
Yep.
Want to consider the age and the material that's on there now and kind of figure out, okay, is it within the life expectancy of the material?
Yeah.
Obviously, some of the stuff that goes along with that is the environmental factors. Where's my home located? Is it on the shore where salty air and high wind is prevalent? That's going to impact all of that. But then even more than that, want to think about the energy efficiency. How well is my home insulated? Is it an older home where insulation has either just deteriorated and rotted over time, or they didn't use it to begin with? But also trying to make sure that my home, I don't want it to be the best one on the block, but I certainly want it to look presentable, whether I want to sell it or not. And then ultimately it comes down to choosing the right material. And really the biggest factor is choosing the right contractor to do the job, because I can spend $1 million on the most expensive material, but if it's installed incorrectly, then I've gained nothing. Right? Does that sound right?
Zero. Yep.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to add, or we kind of covered the gamut?
Yeah, I think we've pretty much gone over everything that realistically needs to be touched on. Again, like hiring any contractor for any home project, just check their license, check their insurance, get it in writing, make sure the contract and everything is specific. If they have a warranty, make sure the warranty is in writing. Okay. But at the end of the day, again, just do your homework.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
Cool. Well, as always, thank you for being the expert, for being the pro. Thanks for allowing me to be the hapless, knowledgeless homeowner. I'm not saying that our audience is knowledgeless. I'm saying that I am oftentimes. That's all we have for you today on the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. Before we go, as always, we want to hear from you. What are some of the questions that you have related to exterior home remodeling, maybe the process involved, some of the behind the scenes stuff? If you have a question or questions, send them to info@askproexteriors.com and place You Ask in the subject. If you are facing an upcoming home project, we hope this episode has empowered you to tackle it with confidence. Remember, knowledge is power, and a little research can go a long way. Until next time, happy homeowning. The You Ask the Pros Answer podcast is produced in-house by the Pro Exteriors team. Pro Exteriors is the exterior contracting division of Empire Construction Group, LLC. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. For more answers to your questions, please subscribe to this channel and podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Do you have an upcoming home remodeling project? Find more answers to your questions at askproexteriors.com.